The book of Numbers stands as a testimony of God's faithfulness in leading his people through the wilderness to the brink of the promised land. This journey was not a straightforward path towards triumph. The people were both the recipients of God's gracious blessings and the rebellious agents of idolatry. Through discipline and instruction, God trained the hearts of the people to worship him as they prepared to enter the land. Many of the names and places mentioned throughout this book are unknown to the modern reader, which leads many to assume that the book of Numbers lacks relevance for today. Israel's journey is, however, an ongoing testimony to the faithfulness of God. Each name is a person God had redeemed from slavery in Egypt. Each place is evidence of God's provision. Each movement is an indication of God's military might and his faithfulness to his promises. The book of Numbers begins in the wilderness of Sinai in the 9th month of the 2nd year after God rescued Israel from slavery in Egypt. The journey stretched across nearly another 39 years in the wilderness as the people moved toward the promised land. The first census listed the men who were the first generation of those redeemed from Israel and who were prepared to lead the advance of the people of God. Instead of obedience to God, however, this first generation consistently murmured against the Lord, failed to trust his provision, and committed heinous sins of disobedience against his instruction. The Lord judged this generation by preventing them from entering the promised land. However, he continued to sustain their lives and provide for their needs in the wilderness. He graciously communicated his word to this generation so that they could prepare their sons and daughters to take the land. After 40 years of wandering, Moses and Aaron counted the second generation. They were prepared to enter the land. The question remained, would this generation succeed where their parents had failed? This book, like all of the Old Testament, stands as a testimony to God's promise to deliver his people from the consequences of their sin. In Numbers, God demonstrated his divine forbearance and benevolence to a wayward and stubborn people. In spite of their sin, God accomplished his good purposes in their lives and on behalf of the surrounding nations. These good purposes ultimately came to a crescendo in the provision of the Messiah, Jesus Christ, who perfectly and finally dealt with Satan, sin, and death. The book foreshadows God's sovereign intention to accomplish these purposes against the backdrop of human sin. Nothing can stop God's plan, not even human sin. His grace is sufficient to lead his people lovingly into his presence, then, now, and forever. God is not man that he should lie, or a son of man that he should change his mind. He has said, and will he not do it? Or has he spoken, and will he not fulfill it? Numbers 23:19.